The vastness of space stretched endlessly before them. Amid this abyss, the SS Ironclad floated alone, a single remnant of a bygone era. Its battered hull, weathered by years of abandonment, reflected a faint shimmer under the dim light of distant stars. On the bridge, Captain Elias Drake stood resolute, his eyes scanning the flickering displays as Lieutenant Ava Thorne relayed incoming data. Silence engulfed the crew until Thorne broke it, her sharp green eyes darting toward the enemy fleet. "The Zeldar," she began, her voice low yet urgent, "loom over Earth. Their forces are here: dreadnoughts, cruisers, and countless fighters." Drake's jaw tightened with determination. The Zeldar Empire, ruthless in their galactic conquests, had underestimated Earth, but their overconfidence would be their undoing. "Our defenses are failing," Captain Thorne warned, her voice trembling. "The Ironclad is outgunned. Shields won't last 5 minutes. What can we do against that fleet?" Drake's lips curled into a grim smile, an expression born from a lifetime of battles. Before Thorne could argue further, a cold voice crackled through the comms. "This is Commander Vorn of the Zeldar fleet," the voice mocked. "Surrender now, or be annihilated." Drake's gaze never wavered as he stared at the enemy fleet, sleek, menacing, and overconfident. He knew the Ironclad carried a secret weapon, the singularity cannon, a relic from an age of innovation, untested for decades. Thorne hesitated, her hands hovering over the controls. "Captain, the cannon. It hasn't been used in years. If it fails—" "We don't have a choice," Drake interrupted, his tone firm. "If we don't fire, Earth is lost." As Thorne activated the weapon, the ship trembled, a low hum signaling the cannon's awakening. Energy coiled within it like a predator ready to strike. Drake's voice dropped to a whisper, "Let them underestimate us." With a flick of his wrist, the cannon fired, releasing a beam faster than light. The Zeldar fleet stood no chance. Their lead dreadnought crumpled, and the remaining ships disintegrated into a vortex of darkness. Panic erupted on the comms. "What have you done?" Vorn's voice screamed. Drake remained silent, his eyes fixed on the devastation. The crew watched in stunned silence as the Zeldar fleet scattered. Thorne finally spoke, her voice trembling with awe. "That was just one shot, Captain. How many more do we have?" Drake turned away, his expression unreadable. "Enough," he replied as the Ironclad prepared for the next wave. The Zeldar regrouped quickly, launching a ferocious counterattack. Sparks flew across the bridge as the Ironclad's shields faltered. Thorne's voice was thick with urgency. "Captain, they're adapting. We can't take another hit." "Prepare the cannon," Drake ordered, his voice unwavering. "One last shot." Despite the risk, the crew charged the weapon as the Zeldar closed in. When the cannon fired again, it unleashed a storm of destruction, consuming the enemy fleet in an unrelenting vortex. Those who survived fled in terror. As silence returned to the bridge, Thorne turned to Drake, exhaustion etched on her face. "We bought time, Captain. But they'll come back." Drake nodded, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. "Let them come," he said softly. The Ironclad, scarred yet unyielding, stood as a testament to humanity's resilience. Against all odds, they would endure. The decoys had worked only once, and the Zeldar were far too clever to fall for the same trick again. Thorne's voice broke the silence, soft yet probing. "What do you think?" This wasn't just a tactical question. She was studying him, as she often did, her composed demeanor beginning to fracture under the strain. Drake remained silent for a moment, the weight of uncertainty pressing on him. Finally he spoke, his voice measured. "We still have one chance, the cannon." The words hung heavily in the air. Thorne shivered, her expression unreadable. "The cannon's power levels are unstable," she whispered. "Elias, if we push it without recalibration, we might." She trailed off, but the consequences were clear. Drake's jaw tightened, the urgency of their situation gnawing at him. If they delayed, the Zeldar would surely deliver the killing blow. He moved toward the console, examining the schematics alongside Thorn. Their only hope lay in the singularity cannon, a devastating weapon of both potential and peril. Thorn sighed, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "One more thing, Captain," she said, tapping a few keys to project a fresh analysis on the screen. It revealed the Zeldar fleet's formation in striking detail. "They're regrouping faster than expected," she said, her tone grim. "But there's a vulnerability, a faint one. If we overload their flagship's core, the entire fleet might collapse." Drake's mind raced, piecing together a strategy. "What's the likelihood the cannon can hit that target?" he asked. Thorn's lips pressed into a thin line. "In its current state, this is our only shot." A faint smile tugged at her lips, though her eyes betrayed the immense pressure they all faced. The weight of the decision bore down on Drake. The ship was battered, the crew exhausted, and their adversary relentless. Yet this wasn't just a battle, it was humanity's fight for survival, a stand against those who saw Earth as nothing more than a forgotten relic. Turning to his crew, Drake met their eyes, each filled with the same unspoken question: how much longer could they endure? His voice cut through the tension. "Our target isn't their fleet, it's their flagship." Thorn blinked in astonishment, her disbelief evident. "You're serious?" Drake nodded firmly. "If the flagship falls, the fleet will scatter. We won't have to sacrifice everything on the front." After a brief pause, Thorn's expression hardened with resolve. "I'll recalibrate the cannon," she said, diving into her controls. The bridge erupted into focused chaos as the crew scrambled to prepare. Systems hummed back to life, the low growl of the cannon growing louder as it powered up. Drake stared out into the void, his pulse pounding. Commander Vorn was a brilliant tactician, but the Zeldar's fatal flaw was their arrogance. They would never anticipate a crippled, ancient vessel striking at the heart of their command. "Cannon at 95%, Thorn called. "Ready in 30 seconds. Drake's focus shifted as alarms blared. A new formation of Zeldar fighters closed in, their precise movements targeting the ironclad's engines. "They're going for our propulsion," Thorn warned, her voice tight with urgency. "Hold steady," Drake commanded, his knuckles white as he gripped the console. The Zeldar weapons lit up the void, their fire growing dangerously close. "Cannon ready," Thorn shouted. Without hesitation, Drake gave the order. The singularity cannon roared, releasing a blinding beam of energy that tore through the darkness. It struck the flagship's energy matrix with pinpoint accuracy. For a moment, nothing happened. Then an enormous explosion ripped through the Zeldar fleet, obliterating nearby ships and scattering their forces. The bridge fell silent. Drake exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Thorn looked at him, exhaustion etched across her face. "We did it," she murmured. Drake's gaze remained fixed on the debris field where the flagship had stood moments before. "We've bought time," he said softly, but deep down he knew the reprieve would be fleeting. The battle was far from over. The ironclad drifted through the wreckage, its scarred hull illuminated by the faint embers of what was once the Zeldar fleet. On the bridge, the crew moved with a quiet efficiency, but the weight of what had just transpired lingered in the silence. Drake stood at the viewport, his eyes fixed on the void ahead, as if waiting for the next move in a game of chess where the stakes were survival itself. Captain Thorn's voice broke the silence, her tone hesitant but steady. "The cannon is offline. That last shot overloaded the system. We'll need days, maybe weeks, to bring it back online." Drake turned, his expression unreadable. "How's the ship?" "Barely holding together," she replied, her fingers dancing across the console. "Shields are at critical, propulsion is shaky, and life support's running on borrowed time." If the Zeldar regroup and strike again, they will. Drake interrupted, his voice calm but resolute. They'll be back, but they'll think twice now. That gives us an edge. Thorn frowned, her green eyes flicking to the tactical display. An edge only lasts so long, Captain. We've pushed the ironclad beyond its limits. If they hit us again, we'll adapt, Drake said sharply, cutting off her train of thought. We've come this far, Thorn. We're not giving up now. A low hum filled the air as Jonah, the ship's chief engineer, emerged from the lower deck. His face was streaked with grease, and his expression was grim. The main reactor's running hot, he said without preamble. We're venting what we can, but it's a matter of time before something gives. We need a safe harbor to make repairs. Drake nodded, considering their dwindling options. What about the nearest station? Thorn shook her head. Nothing friendly in range, and the Zeldar will have scouts patrolling the sector. They'll be watching for us. Then we find somewhere they're not looking, Drake said, his gaze shifting to the star map. His finger hovered over a faint marker, an uncharted nebula far off the beaten path. Here, the Crimson Veil. It's risky, but it might be the cover we need. Jonah raised an eyebrow. Risky doesn't even begin to cover it. That nebula's a graveyard. Ships go in and don't come out. Drake met his gaze evenly. We don't have a choice. Thorn hesitated, then nodded, setting a course for the Veil. Engines might not hold, but I'll make it happen. As the ironclad adjusted its trajectory, the crew braced for the unknown. The Veil loomed ahead, a swirling mass of red and black, like a wound in space itself. It was beautiful in a haunting way, and its reputation as a death trap did little to quell the unease rippling through the bridge. Entering the outer edge of the Veil, Thorn reported, her voice tight. Sensors are erratic. I'm losing readings. Visual only, Drake ordered, his eyes narrowing. Stay sharp. This isn't just a hiding spot, it's a test. The ship plunged deeper into the nebula, the thick clouds of gas obscuring their view and casting eerie shadows across the bridge. The hum of the ironclad systems grew louder, a constant reminder of how fragile their situation had become. Something's out there, Jonah muttered, his eyes glued to a faint blip on the screen. I can't tell if it's a ship or debris. Could be Zeldar, Thorn said, her hand hovering over the weapons console. Or something worse, Jonah added grimly. Drake's voice cut through the tension. Hold fire. Let's not give ourselves away. The bridge fell into a tense silence as the ironclad pressed forward. Every creak of the hull, every flicker of the lights, felt like an omen. Then, without warning, the ship shuddered violently. Status, Drake barked. Some kind of gravitational anomaly, Thorn replied, her fingers flying over the controls. It's pulling us deeper. I'm trying to compensate. Engines are failing, Jonah shouted. We're losing control. Drake gripped the edge of his console, his mind racing. Divert all power to propulsion. Get us clear. It's not enough, Thorn said, her voice tinged with panic. We're being dragged in. As the ship spiraled toward the heart of the nebula, Drake's gaze fell on the tactical display. The gravitational anomaly wasn't just a random occurrence, it was deliberate. A trap. And whoever had said it was still out there waiting. Prepare for impact, he ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. And get ready for whatever's on the other side.